Hello, and welcome to the Moms Love Coaching Podcast, where we talk about self-care from the inside out for moms. I'm your host, Carrie McFarland, along with Angie Turgeon-Ledoux. We are certified life coaches and moms, and in this podcast, we'll go beyond the take a spa day advice and talk about real and sustainable ways that you can feel better, be happier, and stay out of overwhelm and burnout. You spend your life taking care of everyone else. In this podcast, each week, it's all about you taking care of you with no guilt and no apologies. We're so happy that you've decided to spend this time with us, so go ahead and grab your favorite cup of coffee, find a comfortable place, and get ready to spend the next 30 minutes focusing on the most important person in your life, you. Hello, everybody. We're back. Angie and Carrie at Moms Love Coaching.
Hey there.
Helping moms to prioritize their self-care so they can prevent burnout and just feel good about themselves overall. So today we have a topic. We want to talk about how self-care is a superpower. And there's a few different reasons that we wanted to talk about that. But I will just start with why self-care is a superpower. Earlier this week, I had a lot happening with work and family and just in general life. And we also have a cat who is having an issue with her mouth, and she was scheduled to have surgery, but something happened with what was going on with her. And we needed to take her to the vet unexpectedly. So we took her to the vet, or we scheduled to take her to the vet for 6:30 at night. After, I had been in work all day, the dog was in daycare, we had to get her, I had to make sure I got home in time. I had to leave work a little early to make sure all this happened, come home and get dinner for everybody, get dinner for myself, feed the dog, do all the things. And I was just thinking to myself that I was doing this without really feeling any stress. I was focused, but I wasn't stressed. And I was just doing the next thing and doing the next thing and doing the next thing and doing the next thing. And then getting her to the vet and finding out all the stuff that we needed to find out about her. And then getting the bill, which would have set me off in the past too. And then, I was thinking about all that the next day as I was going to work. And I started thinking to myself, you're kind of a badass. Like you just everything that's happening at work, everything that's happening at home, the holidays are coming, all these different stressors, the cat and my dog has a thing too. That's a whole nother thing. We could talk about that later. It's just like the dog. I just started really recognizing that I really didn't feel stressed. I really did just feel like, okay, this is a thing that I need to do. And how is it going to get done? And just thinking about how it's going to get done and then just making that happen, and no drama and no overwhelm and no resentment and no anything, just doing it. And I realized that I have been really focusing on how I take care of myself in all ways. And I'm not perfect. And I definitely, can add things in, but that will happen naturally as time goes on. But I'm in a place now where things just don't bother me as much. They just don't. It's just like, okay, this is happening. And how am I going to deal with this? Okay, I'll do this. Instead of what used to happen is something would pop up, like this vet visit. And my mind would just go crazy. Like I would just completely not know what to do. I would spin and spin and spin. I would just get anxious and all out of sorts. And I just, I would get snappy and, all these different things. And now that I know the difference between how I am now and how I used to be, because I really didn't know the difference, I understand now how important it is to keep myself in that state so I can handle things that come at me in life that you don't expect, because things just come at you that you don't expect, and they just come out of nowhere. And I really, I mean, this is going to sound weird, but like, I understand now what it means and how important it is to take care of myself in all the different ways so I can handle all those things that come at me. I don't know. Does that make sense? Like that's kind of how I was thinking about it.
What was really interesting about when you were telling the story about coming home last week and just like you said, I didn't feel stressed.
Yeah.
And I think that was the piece that we know when a lot of things are happening and when we're coping. Like I could see myself being in a similar situation, but maybe that evening or maybe that night I wouldn't sleep. So then I started to feel the stress. So there's also that kind of person that you manage the stress in the moment, but then afterward it's impacting you. You're saying
Yeah.
you slept great. The next
Yeah.
morning you're reflecting back on it and you're like, huh. And then you start thinking about how you would have handled it years ago. So my question is, what is different about how you manage stress now, besides the outward expression of the stress, than it was in the past?
Um, well, so there's a couple things. I have a fundamental belief in myself that I can handle anything that comes my way. And that has been something that I've always believed on a certain level, but it's like now it's just a given. It doesn't really matter what it is. Like I know I can handle it. Even if I have a moment of like, what am I going to do about this? Like I know that I can calm myself down and handle whatever happens. So that's sort of one piece of it. The second piece is I I'm taking care of myself with all sorts of things, with my morning routines, with walking, with understanding and practicing not being thrown around by other people's anxiety. That's a big one for me because anxiety is contagious. And if you're not aware that you are being affected by somebody else's anxiety, you will go off the rails. And that used to happen to me all the time. And so now I can recognize when people are being like that and not get sucked in. So that is a huge one. And, just doing things that I like and want to do, regardless of how other people think about it, and doing that over and over and over and over again, it just puts me in a calmer place because I feel more in control of what I am doing with myself instead of being sort of the victim of everybody else's schedule, of everybody else's needs, of everybody else's wants. Like I put myself first, and it's not as if I don't take care of, I mean, I still, my kids are still home. I take care of my kids. I have a dog. I take care of the dog, so it's not like I don't take care of other people and pets. It's just that I have that understanding that I'm choosing to do that in that moment. And I don't have to if I don't want to, but I'm choosing to. And it really does, it puts you back in control rather than like, oh, I need to do dinner and I need to do this and I need to do that and I need to do this. It's like, you don't need to do any of it. If you want to do it, that's great. I mean, and it's different. My kids are older too. So I know it's different when you have little kids and especially babies. It's like you are their source of everything. And so you feel compelled to take care of them, obviously, because you're the mother. But if you can take a step back and realize that there are other ways for you to take care of that baby that don't always involve you, that will give you back. And that's not something that I would have been able to, I wasn't in coaching. I wasn't thinking this way when my kids were little. So that would have been hard for me. But if I had started hearing that message when my kids were little, I may have adopted it sooner because it is something that is, it's a shift. It's not just like you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. It's not like that. It's like a shift in the way that you think. And so if you can get to the place when your kids are little to say, I am putting my kids in daycare 2 days a week because that is the best way that I can take care of them, because that helps me to reset and recharge, which overall helps me to take care of them better, then that's what I'm going to do. And that is never something I would have considered, but looking back on it, that seems very clear to me now. So that was one of the things, I'm getting off on a tangent, but that was like one of the things when I was, as I always do, right? That was one of the things when my kids were little, that we had decided we were never putting our kids in daycare, and one of us would always be home with them. Part of it was money, but most of it was because I couldn't bring myself to put them in daycare, because in my mind, that meant that I wasn't taking care of my kids. And if I had kids, I should be taking care of them. It never occurred to me that there are 100 million different ways to take care of them. And some of those ways mean that I'm actually not involved in the day-to-day. That is me taking care of. Like, I
Yeah, this is
never,
good. It's going to sound cliche, but taking care of yourself, mom, is taking care of your kids,
right.
right?
It's true. And I didn't allow myself to do that. And so I lived in a perpetual state of stress and overwhelm, which came out in the form of anger to everybody around me. I didn't want anybody to help me. I didn't want to, well, I mean, it's not that I didn't want to talk about it. I just didn't think there was a need to talk about anything. It was just like, I have stuff to do. I need to do it. You're not going to do it right. Just get out of my way.
Yeah, it's like that.
I'm just going to
Like
do it.
the way you describe it and talk about it, it's sort of like your motor was on high, and there was, get out of my way. Just get
Yeah.
out of my way. You want to help? Get out of my way.
Yes. Right. Exactly.
Right?
Just move. Just move. Right. And to the point where I couldn't even, like, part of me, like, being so angry to everybody else was that I sometimes couldn't articulate what it is that I needed somebody to do. So, like, if somebody asked me, like, if we were visiting grandparents or whatever, or if they were visiting us and they're like, well, we can put them to bed, right? Which, that's a whole thing, because I, like, that was like my thing, putting the kids to bed, right? So now somebody else wants to do it, and I'm just like, like, I don't want them to do it, but they're only here, you know, so many times a year, and they should do it. Right. So then I have all that chatter in my head, like I should let them do it, because even though I didn't want them to. So we'll just put that aside for a second.
You had a lot of rules, Carrie.
But yeah,
a lot of rules.
I had a lot of rules. Well, if people would just, read up on the rules, I wouldn't have had a problem.
Were they written down? Up here,
No.
maybe up here in your head.
They were not written down. Well, so that brings me back to, so somebody would ask, like, well, what's the routine for bed, right? Now I have to recall all of that information and then verbalize it to somebody so they can understand it in the way, so they can do it exactly the way that I need them to. And I would just be so overwhelmed with, number one, not wanting them to do it, and then having that battle in my head that they should do it, and even though I don't want them to do it, blah, 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 blah. And then, just the complete state of stress and overwhelm that I was constantly in. I literally couldn't verbalize stuff. So I would just be like, well, it's just, like, you do that. And then I couldn't even get it out,
Right.
So
right.
that was frustrating. And that would make me angry. And I just, and then they'd ask questions and I'd just be like, oh, I just told you, what I mean? Like, it was just, it was really intense, I guess is a good word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was very intense.
It's intense.
Yeah.
So how, like, if you could go back there, what could have been, we were talking, of course, before we started recording, but what could have been a way in for you or a way out for you? Obviously, the moms that are listening to our podcast are interested in understanding a way to think about their thinking and look at their own behavior and examine their own actions. or else they probably wouldn't be listening to a Mom's Love Coaching podcast, right? So
Right.
if you're in the what if you're in the middle of that? What might have been helpful for you to hear, see, if you had started to be open then the way you were open later when the girls got older.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, it did take me a very long time to get out of that state, a very long
Hmm.
time. So I didn't find coaching until like 2018, 2019, something like that. And it's
Hmm.
not like when I found it, it was like, oh, I know exactly
Oh.
what's, what I need to do. And right. I mean, like even after that, it took some years to have like my light bulb. But it's so hard to answer that question because I wasn't receptive to any. So if somebody had come along and said, I'm noticing that you're doing this and this and this, and I think it's because of anxiety or hormones or you're just burned out and you need sleep. I mean, I probably would have bit their head off.
Hmm.
In all honesty, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I would not have been receptive to it. I
Hmm.
probably would have felt attacked.
Hmm.
And I would have felt like they thought I was doing it wrong because that was a big
Hmm.
theme for me, that I'm doing it
Yep.
wrong, which was another source of stress all the time, which is why I
Yep.
second guess myself constantly. So I was constantly in this state of like, is that right? I'm not sure and so that would like always be kind of like running in my head in the background. If I had been receptive to it, even the slightest bit of somebody trying to help me with awareness about what was happening, I mean, it would have been slow. Honestly, the biggest thing that I always thought about was that nobody understands. Nobody understands what I'm going through because nobody's listening to me. Because I would try to tell people and people would always shut it down and say, well, if you just do this or if you just do that, if you just do, and they would try to fix it that way. And I really felt like nobody was listening to me. And that was hugely frustrating. And so then I would internalize that and say, I guess I'm just going to have to do everything myself. Like, I know what I mean, I know how I feel, and nobody else can help me. So I'm just going to have to do everything myself. So I guess if somebody had just listened and not tried to fix it, if I had said something like, the baby is just screaming and I can't think, I can't do anything, I can't focus on anything, and I just can't handle it. Instead of somebody saying, well, why don't you try swaddling her? Or why don't you try doing this? Or why don't you try doing that? And I'd be like, why don't you shut the hell up? Like, do you think I didn't do
I'm
all those
sure it
things?
wasn't. I'm sure it wasn't shut the hell up.
Probably not. I'm PGing this for the
Right,
podcast.
exactly.
It's like, do you think I haven't? So then it was like, oh, do you think I haven't done all that stuff? Like,
Yeah,
of
right.
course. Do you think I can't do it? Do you think I'm incompetent? Like, what do you think I've been doing? You know what I mean? So then it would just immediately set me off. So if somebody would just be
Right.
like, yeah, you know what? That does suck. I know exactly what you're
That sounds
talking about.
really hard.
Yeah, that sounds hard. I'm here if you need me. You're doing everything. You're doing great. This is just a really hard time right now, and I get it. If somebody had done something like that, and I'm not saying that would have fixed everything, but
No.
in those few seconds, I think I would have felt like somebody gets it finally, you know,
Hmm.
and I never had that. I don't,
Right.
I'm really trying to think as we're talking, if that has ever happened or ever happened when the kids were little like that. And honestly, I really don't think one person ever did that for me.
That's so sad.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that they didn't want to help. It's just that they wanted to fix it by telling me what to do.
Right. Because in
Or
their mind, that was
in there, that was
helping, that was
helping.
supporting.
Right.
Right.
And it's not that it wasn't helping in the sense that it was helpful in the sense that, yes, some tasks got done. Right.
Right.
But it wasn't helpful for my mental state because it didn't address the things that I needed and wanted addressed. So I just learned to do everything myself. And I was just, I was just overwhelmed for a very long time. Way beyond the baby years, way beyond the baby years.
Right.
Up until the teen years, really. It really wasn't until my oldest was 16, maybe 17,
Right.
that I really started to understand that I needed to do things differently for myself in order for things to change. That was a very long time. And I will also say that I didn't understand how my nervous system was a factor in this, how hyped up I was all the time was a function of my nervous system being completely out of whack. I didn't know any of these things. And what really drove that home for me was, this is very recent, like within this year. I was in the grocery store and there was a baby crying, it was a newborn baby. Like you can tell the newborn baby cry, right? It was a newborn baby. And every time, ever since I had my girls, every time I heard a baby cry in the store, it would completely nerve me up. I would just I would get super tense and super anxious.
Right.
Yeah. At the time I didn't think it was abnormal. I'm like, all mothers probably get like this, right? But it's like, I would get so anxious about somebody else's baby crying. And to the point where I was like, if I couldn't see what was happening, in my mind, I'd be like, where is the mother? What is the mother doing? Is the baby by themselves? Do I need to go over there and help? What is happening? I would just completely yeah. So I heard a baby crying in the grocery store this year, and I did not have a reaction at all. The first time in 19 years that I didn't have a reaction to somebody else's baby crying, beyond the poor baby's crying, that kind of thing. But I didn't feel that visceral feeling, anxiety, overwhelm, from somebody else's baby crying. Right.
So can you imagine what it was like when it was your baby?
When my baby was crying.
I can just imagine when it was your baby crying and all the expectations you had on yourself for being a certain type of mother and showing up in that moment, the pressure that created.
Yeah. When my babies cried, the whole world stopped. And that's the best way I can describe it. The whole world stopped. And I see mothers and hear mothers on different podcasts and stuff, they're holding their baby and the baby's fussing and crying and they're trying, but they're dealing with it and they're having the conversation with somebody. And I could never do that. If my baby was crying and I was trying to console or feed or, change a diaper or do whatever, when the baby was crying, if somebody tried to talk to me, just go over the edge because I was so right to the top of my level that I had no capacity for anything else, none.
Right.
And I really thought that was normal. I really had no idea that was not I had no idea that was something that I probably should have addressed in a different way. I just didn't know. I felt like it was normal.
And now I'm thinking about, the mom that might be having struggling right now and thinking that, well, maybe I am overreacting, and overreacting, that word itself, I think feels judgmental.
Yeah. People would tell me that. And that would set me off.
Oh my God. Nobody wants to be told. Okay, people, nobody wants to be told.
Yeah. Don't tell a new mother that she's overreacting.
No, do not.
Say that.
But for you to describe your own self, say, I feel like my brain is making it bigger than it is.
Yeah,
and
100%.
For you to start just to notice, I think it's that noticing that even though your children were much older and teens and you started hearing about this work and hearing about what we learned about the brain and how the brain reacts in stress and all those things, that moment of self-compassion. If somebody had given if you had been able to, in that moment, to say, "This is totally normal, the way you're feeling. It's okay. It's
Right.
okay that you're ready to lose your shit right now." It's
It's
so
okay
if
that
you
you
had been
have
able
lost your shit.
right, right. So if you had been
Yeah.
able to even get that much relief from your brain, just I mean, that's an incredible um thing to practice in the moment, just to like it's going to be okay. Like you pat yourself, you know, just somehow reassure yourself because you can't count on the people in your life to know what to say or to say the thing that's not going to send you down the spiral of, oh my gosh, just
Yeah.
leave me alone.
Yeah. And just like the mental drain it takes for you to explain how you're feeling and why that thing that that person said upset you, like, like the mental, I mean, it sounds silly to either somebody who hasn't gone through it, or maybe it's been so long, right? But the mental capacity that it takes to recall how you're feeling and then process that in your brain to be able to verbalize it to somebody in a coherent way
Right.
is, I'll just speak for me. That was so far beyond my capacity at that
Hmm.
time. That's part of the reason why I just didn't say anything, because it's like all those thoughts and feelings were like in my head and they completely made sense. But if I tried to articulate that to somebody, it would come out jumbled and incoherent, and it would just cause more questions, which would cause me to have to explain things more. And it would just become a whole big thing. Like, it was just
Right.
easier for me to just not say anything.
Right. So if you know somebody that is reacting that way, just show empathy. Show that I'm here for you when you're ready to talk. I'm here. The person on the outside of it, it can feel very helpless because you see that the other person needs help but doesn't know how to ask for what they need. And depending on your relationship, sometimes you can make some assumptions and act on them and it be helpful. But probably that better be a pretty solid relationship there, right?
Yeah.
um, in order to do that. So, uh,
And just like little things too, like, so you basically, when you have kids, now you're spending your life taking care of other people, right?
mhm,
You're taking care of your kids, you're taking care of your husband, you're taking care of people at work, you're taking care of pets, you're taking care of your parents. Like, your whole life is like dedicated to taking care of other people. And not everybody sees that you need to be taken care of too. So I would just say, not beating yourself up for not knowing what to do in every situation,
mhm,
because you're not going to, but also understand that whatever you choose is going to work out. So you don't really need to know, right? I mean, I think about all the quote unquote mistakes I made with my kids when they were little. Number one, they don't even remember. Right?
no,
And number 2, they're totally fine. It's
right,
like, but in the moment when they're little, like, you think every little thing is gonna change their life in these epic ways, and that's really, it doesn't really matter if you choose formula over breastfeeding one day because you're spent and you just wanna give them a bottle. Like, it doesn't matter, I
mhm,
mean, I know those types of things are triggering for a lot of moms because, especially when it comes to feeding the baby, there's lots of controversy about what's better and all this stuff. And it's like, if you breastfeed, awesome. If you don't, awesome. It doesn't matter. Your baby's being fed, you're taking care of your baby. That's it.
mhm, right,
Is one better than the other? Maybe, but it also depends on the baby. Because if you're stressed and overwhelmed and maybe not producing enough for them, then maybe it is better to supplement with a bottle. once in a while, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. The end result is you're feeding your baby and your baby has a full belly. And that's all that matters. So, and I know that's sort of a loaded topic, but those are the types of things that set moms off because they're like, oh, I have to do it this way and I have to be perfect. And this is what they say, everybody's like, they say this. And it's just like, I don't care what they say. Like, what do you say? What do you want to do? And
Right.
does
What
that
do you
feel
want to
good?
do?
Right? If you're breastfeeding your baby, I'll just use myself as an example. I didn't care if I breastfed my baby. I tried it. It was a complete disaster. So I stopped doing it. And I, and
Oh,
I,
well,
and I
somehow they
bottle fed.
survived.
Yeah. And I bottle fed them. Like, but I mean, I did breastfeed them like a little bit, but like basically like my first daughter, she had issues with her muscle tone in her jaw and stuff. And she had trouble latching on. And so it was just easier to feed her a bottle. And physical therapy wise for her, the bottle was better just because of the way it was shaped, and you had a little more control over how you like put it in her mouth and stuff. So for her, that was actually a little bit better. For my second daughter, I probably breastfed her a little bit more, but it was always supplemented with food. I mean, supplement, with a steak. It's always supplemented with a bottle.
Oops.
But yeah, I mean, I remember, people would talk about breastfeeding as like this magical bonding, close moment that you had with your babies. And I'm telling you, that was not my experience. It
That's
was
right.
a
And it's
freaking
not a lot of
disaster.
women that is not their experience. And it's that, that power of, and it can be a disaster for some women and a beautiful thing for other women. And
Yeah,
one is not better than the other.
right.
Like you said, the bottom line is that the child is thriving and growing. How they
Right.
get there might be
Yeah.
different.
Yes. Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
again, those
So,
rules, thinking about those rules and how much the rules you have for yourself. Question, that's one of the things that I've been learning this in recent times. It's like, question why you believe what you believe. Just that right
yeah.
there.
Where did it come from?
Right.
Yeah. A lot of my stuff came from how I was brought up,
Right.
which is why I was convinced that if kids didn't do exactly what you said, you were doing it wrong. And so I had
Right.
all this stress in my head about like, if they don't behave, then I'm a bad mother and I can't be a bad mother, right? You'd freak out. And,
Right.
and now we know it's like, oh my God, kids are kids. They're going to
Right.
learn. Just, it doesn't like, you don't have to like come down on them and feel like you're doing something wrong. I think
Right.
that's the biggest thing. You don't
Hmm.
have to feel like you're doing something wrong just because they're doing something that you don't want them to do.
Right. Right.
That's
It's the pile on judgment. It's the, like,
yeah,
you're judging the way you're responding or the way you're thinking or the way you're feeling, and just know that the way you're feeling is never wrong. Everybody,
right.
you're entitled to feel the way you want to feel, and that other people don't have to understand it either. You get to have your feelings. And I
Yeah.
think that's, don't judge yourself for that. If there's anything I want to tell you not to do, it's don't pile on the judgment that there's something fundamentally wrong with you because you're behaving this way or acting this way or thinking this way or feeling this way, right? So,
Right. And don't listen
yeah.
to other people when they try to make you feel better by inadvertently dismissing how you feel,
Right.
And when you say things like, I mean, I would have like all these thoughts and one of my thoughts sometimes was like, I don't think I'm cut out to be a mother. I just don't think I'm not this is not something I'm good at, and I would have that thought. And once in a
Hmm.
while, I would express that thought, and instead of somebody, and I know this is asking a lot of people, but instead of like understanding where I was coming from and just listening and being empathetic, I would get oh, you don't really feel that way. You're just tired,
Yeah. The
And I'd be
dismissal.
like, yeah. And I'd be like, okay. Yeah, I guess I'm just
Right.
tired.
I
You know
guess I
what I
can't.
mean?
This is what you're inside. You're saying, oh, I guess I can't talk to you about this hard feeling. This is
Right.
a hard
Exactly.
feeling. And if I'm not cut out to be a mom, what's that mean about me? And all the insecurities that that statement is revealing. There was
Right.
an opportunity for someone to say, tell me more. I'm here to listen.
Right. Right.
Right.
And so because you can't rely on other people to do that, you have to do that for yourself, which
Right.
is hard. I mean, that's a hard
Yeah.
thing,
Very hard.
but it's something that I wish I had known earlier. I think it would have helped me with the anxiety. I think it would have helped me with feeling isolated and then, having everything come out as anger and yelling and pushing people
Yeah.
away.
Yes.
Because that's what I did. And I had no idea that I had no idea that anxiety could present as anger. So when people, I remember, after my first daughter and my second daughter was born, the nurses would call and say, how are you doing? And then go down their checklist. Instead of asking me about my behavior, they would just say, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling this? And I'd be like,
Right.
no, I'm not. I'm not feeling that way. Because I had no idea that anxiety could present as anger. But they
Exactly.
asked me, are you yelling at people? Are you, feeling, I don't even know how they would describe that overwhelmed feeling, but are you feeling, are you having different thoughts about different things? Are you doing, but it was just like this super short checklist, are
Right.
you
We should
feeling
come
like
up
you're
with
going to
that.
hurt the baby? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling this? And I'd be like, no. And they'd be like, all right, you're good. I'm like, I don't think I'm good. I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Yeah. It doesn't feel good.
It
Doesn't
doesn't
feel
feel,
good.
but you're
And
telling
then
me,
you just,
yeah,
yeah. Then you just stop talking because,
you just do it
yeah.
yourself.
So, right. So there's a checklist we need to make, Carrie. The
Yes.
signs that you may be experiencing anxiety, like the outward signs of anxiety. For me, it was definitely yelling and over functioning, where I was
Yes.
taking care
Over
of
functioning.
everything
Yes.
because nobody else could do it right.
Yeah.
Certainly my husband couldn't do anything right. My, the animals were always underfoot and the, all the things. And so, rather than recognizing that I needed a moment, that I needed some self-love and self-care, it just came out as blame and finger pointing and all that's how I dealt with it.
Yeah.
And never really understood it. Now, I mean, that's a whole other podcast, right? To I wish I knew then what I know now. And I can't go back and change how I was then. But I can do this work where hopefully somebody that is listening to this podcast might recognize themselves in some of the things we're talking about and know that it's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
That there's
It's
nothing wrong with you.
right.
That
And at least that takes away some of the burden, some of the judgment off of yourself, right? I mean, just being aware of it is huge. It doesn't fix everything, but it helps a lot when you realize of course I'm doing this because I am feeling overwhelmed and I am feeling anxious and I am sleep deprived, which is another
and I
thing,
am
right?
probably nutrition deprived because
And I'm nutrition
when you're
deprived.
you're sitting down to you're grabbing whatever's easy,
Yep.
and then you're just putting your head down and doing what you need to do, and that can
Yeah.
come at a price.
Yeah. So I would say that self-care, because self-care is different depending on what stage of life you're in, but self-care for moms when their kids are little and especially when they're babies is giving yourself compassion and recognizing that you're not doing anything really. You can't do it wrong. You
Right.
cannot do it wrong. You just, there's no way that even if your kid, I don't know, poops in the middle of the night and is in his or her dirty diaper all night long and wakes up with a rash, you didn't do it wrong. He just has a rash now. And now you're going to tend to that. But you didn't do it wrong because he got a rash, and I know that's a very specific example, but it's like, it's those kinds of things that set moms off.
Right.
And just having compassion for yourself. You can't do it wrong. And the last thing I'll say is, I was listening to something recently that said, everybody talks about breathing and taking deep breaths, and, that has been shown to calm down your nervous system and all this stuff. And all that's true. But what this person said is that anxiety comes from not breathing in that way. It's not that anxiety just appears and then you do that to get rid of it or to make it better. It's that you're already not doing that, which causes the anxiety in the first place.
So you're not breathing. That is part of what heightens the anxiety. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That totally makes sense. Because think about it, when you have a cold and you're super congested and you wake up and or like other situations where you might be finding it hard to breathe, the anxiety that causes. If you're not breathing, if you're holding your breath, breathe, mom, breathe.
Breathe. Just breathe, right? We flip it around. We say, oh, well, if you're anxious, then do this. But really, it's you are anxious because you're not paying attention to your breathing. Everybody breathes too shallow. So just paying attention to that, because you can do that anywhere, no matter what you're doing. You can always just take a deep breath and hold it for a second and let it out. You can do that when you're driving. You can do that when you're nursing. You can do that when you're doing the dishes. You can do that when you're walking. You can do it anywhere. And just being mindful of that. And again, it's not going to solve all the problems, but all these little things that you do for yourself help to ease all of that overwhelm. So you can get to a state where you can see things more clearly and then be able to take care of yourself better, which then helps you get through life better and take care of everybody else the way that you want to take care of everybody, So I think that's the biggest thing.
Thank you. That's awesome.
All right. I guess we'll end it there. So
practice your superpower, folks.
Yes. Practice your superpower. This was a long one. So if you made it through all the way to the end, we appreciate you.
Yes. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Till next time. Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to us if you like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. This makes it easier for everyone to find us and helps us spread our message about self-care from the inside out. Have a wonderful week, and remember, making yourself the priority is the highest form of self-care.